Hi, I'm Tom Foster, Inc. Magazine's editor-at-large. Welcome to the Inc. 5000 Vision Conference. I am thrilled that my guest for this session is none other than Ethan Brown, the founder and CEO of Beyond Meat. Beyond Meat, as you probably know at this point, is a company that builds meat directly from plants. Ethan gained an appreciation for agriculture and the natural world from his father, a professor and farmer. After beginning his career working in clean energy, Ethan kept coming back to the role of livestock in the economy and the environment, and had what I consider a somewhat radical epiphany at some point and we want to talk about this today, where he decided if we completely reinvented how humans get protein and switched it from animals to plants, that one change could have large implications for challenges that we face around human health, around climate change, around natural resources, and around animal welfare. So he founded Beyond Meat in 2009. Now, just 11 years later, Beyond Meat's products are available in well over, I believe, 100,000 retailers, restaurants around the world, 80 some countries around the world. Beyond Meat was the first plant-based meat to be sold in the meat case alongside beef in major grocery chains, and its products are at McDonald's, Subway, various large restaurant chains. Beyond Meat is also somewhat of a lightning rod because the very idea of it challenges some very basic notions about what food is and where food comes from. I think that's another way of saying it's a really big idea. And that's what I want to talk about today. This conference is all about the future and all about how we tackle large challenges that we all face. And I think few companies sort of better represent the kind of radical thinking that may be required to face some of the things we face. With that, let's get started. Ethan, welcome to the Inc. Vision Conference. Thanks for being here.
Tom, thank you. It's great to be back together, and we have a history now of working together and having you back in Missouri, and so it's good to be here over a video.
Likewise, great to see you. So, as I said, the Vision Conference is meant to help the entrepreneurial community share ideas and really sort of see what's possible as they face the future. I want to start by going back to sort of the genesis of Beyond Meat and how you landed on this very big idea. Can you kind of walk us through that process, how you came to that epiphany?
Sure, and thank you for the interest. So for me, it was really a gradual process of putting together different pieces of thought, adjacencies, and kind of bringing them into one framework that took many, many years. I began, as you noted, really with a personal interest in agriculture and the outdoors that was instilled in me from my father. And so I grew up in the city, but we had a farm, which we still have today, outside the city that we spent an enormous amount of time at when I was growing up. And he actually turned it into a dairy farm throughout much of my childhood. And so we would go back and forth, and I just loved the opportunity to be outside and to understand the animals both in the barn and in the fields, and then those that we kept in our house. And I took that with me into my college and then professional life. But it was more of a side interest, agriculture and animals. And I went after climate change in a really significant way through working on fuel cells. I wanted to try to be disruptive to the automotive industry and find a replacement for the internal combustion engine. And so I was very fortunate to work for a great company called Ballard Power Systems that had the leading proton exchange membrane fuel cell in the market. And they're still around today doing a great job. But I began to think about the role of agriculture in climate. And I began to think about whether I was focused in my career on the thing that mattered most in terms of climate. And I began to look at and better understand the role of livestock in greenhouse gas emissions. And as I did that, it turned me back to the kind of interest I had as a child in that area. And I began to build a case for it in my mind around, if we could come up with a way to still provide meat to humans, because meat is something that's important in our history, to our diet, and our evolution. It plays such an important role in who we are today, that I didn't envision a world where we'd all be eating salad, but I did think about how could you skip the animal and make a piece of meat directly from plants. And that just kind of sat in my mind for many years. And you get married, you get kids, have a mortgage, and so the kind of the risk tolerance maybe might diminish a little bit. But it came so strong in my mind that I had to go after this idea. And the basic notion that became very clear to me is that the things that are in meat, amino acids, lipids, trace minerals, vitamins, and water, are abundant in the universe. They are not exclusive to the animal. What the animal is doing is organizing those core constituent parts of meat in a particular structure, right? But they're gaining the inputs from two things, from plants and from water. And so why not look into plants and find that which is in meat and then assemble it in the architecture of animal muscle and provide that directly? And that was something that began to really fascinate me. And the other thing that was really important to me was the idea that you could be of service to four different really urgent global problems by focusing on one thing. I'd never seen anything like that in my career, in the sense that you could, just by focusing on changing the meat at the center of the plate from meat that has been harvested from an animal to meat that's been harvested from plants, you could impact human health, you could impact climate, you could impact things like water use, land, et cetera, so just natural resources. And then lastly, you could impact animal welfare just by doing one thing. And if you do it well enough, you could have a really, really significant impact on the world. And it's my view that there will be a group of humans that separates meat from animals, and that'll happen within our lifetime. And I want that group to be beyond meat, and that's what we're here doing.
So what I love about that story, there are a bunch of things I really like about that story. The thing that as you were talking really struck me is, you were working on you said, trying to replace the internal combustion engine. It's not like you were trying to do something, incremental. You were working on a big idea, but then you had this idea that is sort of even bigger in the sense that it is, there's sort of a fundamental shift. You were turning something inside out, not just trying to replace something, but saying, hey, let's create meat. Like, people had made veggie burgers for a long time, and they were sort of a simulation of a burger. But you weren't saying that. You were saying, let's create meat, but let's take the animal out of the equation. There's something radical about that, and about the sort of the mind shift that requires. And I want to unpack that a little bit more, and maybe take it outside of the context just of your company, and think about, how can entrepreneurs, people who are trying to solve big problems in the world, get themselves in a headspace to be able to make that kind of paradigm shift that you're talking about, regardless of what they're working on?
It's a great question, and I'm sure we have an author that we probably both enjoy reading. Stephen Johnson has written a lot on this subject, and I just happened to read one of his books recently, Ghost Map, about the cholera outbreak in London, and so I started to read more about his work on innovation. And for me, a lot of that work resonated with me in the sense that you have to marinate in a problem like that. That's the key for me. It may just be a disposition to do that in general, but to be able to sit with something long enough, day after day, hour after hour, where you're continuing to think about it. It's at that point your brain starts to make connections. If you are distracted and have or lack the intensity of thought around it, you won't connect the dots, right? And so for me, it was a process of marinating in the issues for so long that it became very, very clear to me that we got to strip this down to its core. And if you strip it down to its core, you think about material and you don't think about origin. And so if I could get myself to think about, do you need a chicken, cow, or pig? Say, well, wait a minute, you don't. What you need are these 5 materials, and I can get those from really anywhere. And if you look back on origin of life literature, the primordial soup, a lot of it's already in there, right? And so this is just this incredible genetic explosion from that point into different life forms that all share very, very common elements. And so I think it's a very narrow view that says you need a chicken, cow, or pig to assemble these materials into the form of meat. And what's so great about this is that there's a connectedness in these problems. So our human health issue is not separate from our environmental issue in the sense that we put into our bodies matters so much to our long-term health and our short-term performance. If you look at an athlete, for example, an athlete that is eating a diet that's very heavy in red meat is going to have issues around inflammation. You look at an athlete like Chris Paul, who's one of our ambassadors, who decides to no longer eat animal protein, but to eat plant-based protein. He's having terrific success in terms of his agility and ability to play the game much longer. And so it's this notion that what we put into our bodies can help us be better and healthier. What we put into the earth in terms of how we treat the earth, whether we're using herbicides and pesticides and everything else, it's the same idea that these systems matter, and we can't isolate them. We can't think of ourselves as independent from the choices that we make in terms of the nutrition we put in our body, or independent of the environment in terms of what we're putting into our body. Both of them come back to us. And so if you want to solve for those problems, you have to be very, very focused on what you're putting into both your body and then out into the earth.
So it sounds like you didn't have like a lightning bolt moment. You sort of, as you said, you sort of marinated yourself in this problem for a while until the pieces started clicking together. But you can't point to a moment where, because I think when we're looking for a big idea, it's often like we imagine that moment of like, the great light bulb goes off. But I don't think you're saying you had that.
No, and I think if the literature on a lot of these innovations that stick around, I think those moments are less common than people would think. It's often this issue of, I think there is an emotional moment where you can no longer say no to the calling you have or to the idea that's in your head, and that is often what triggers people. So if you look at Darwin, for example, he sat on Origin of Species for, I think, something like 20 years. I don't have the exact number, but there was fear about what the Church of England would consider, and his wife was particularly conservative. But there was a moment when he realized that other academics were coming up with very similar theories, and they were going to publish them. And so that emotional moment where he had to say, "I got to go do this," came to him. And you see that with so many other breakthroughs. And so for me, that was true in the sense that this was an idea that I had for a very long time, and it just took kind of being so uncomfortable in not going forward with it that I had to go forward with it. And that discomfort propels you out of, it allows you to take more risk because if you become so uncomfortable, you have to do something, you kind of stop thinking about the rest of the issues. It's like wearing a pair of shoes that are too small. All you want to do is get out of them. And for me, that became such an important part of my life that I had to go do it. I was uncomfortable not doing it.
You're talking about these sort of four large issues that you're sort of able to simultaneously address. My understanding is that climate change was sort of the animating one, the one that got you thinking about it in the first place. And on that issue in particular, can you talk for a moment about, because I think this is relevant to all kinds of entrepreneurs, what are the consequences of inaction?
Yeah.
Why is it?
Yeah, what's fascinating to me is when I first started working on climate, I was out of graduate school, and it was still very theoretical. It was a lot of doom and gloom about what was going to be happening in the earth as a result, and our culture and our cities were not yet impacted in a way that was obvious, but that has changed completely throughout the course of my career. Where I think it's absolutely clear that things like Katrina and the sheer number of storms we're having and fires, et cetera, that the issues here, it's front and center. It's something we have to deal with. So it's not only the impact on our own culture and societies and those that are most vulnerable that is so disturbing. There'll be people who can always move and react and get protective measures put in place because of their wealth, but it's those that don't have that in Haiti and elsewhere that are going to be impacted first and hardest. But then it's the biodiversity, and I don't think we have the right really to just have a mass extinction based on our own desire to continue with the kind of consumption patterns that we have. We have to change. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the earth.
Who do you look at in sort of the wider entrepreneurial world that who may or may not be addressing the issues that you're talking about, but in whatever industry they're in, whether it's transportation or communication or who knows what, that this person, this person's company represents the kind of radical rethinking that we're talking about. Who else is doing that you look to for inspiration or just think is doing cool stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunately it's a very obvious answer, and I wish I had one that was more, maybe less so. But I think what Tesla is doing is amazing. As I mentioned, I came out of that industry, and the key breakthrough I think they made was not a technological breakthrough. I mean, and what I love about, I went out and spoke there a couple of years ago, and I remember looking at the fact that they were just so open about their intellectual property. So that's not what's driving Tesla's success. It's that relentless focus on improving, and making it desirable. Right? You can solve the transportation issue and climate by forcing everyone to ride a bus, and nobody wants to do that. Or you can make a really sexy car that everyone wants to drive, and then you can make it cheaper and cheaper year over year. And there's analogies there that we are also pursuing. There's strategies there rather that we're pursuing in terms of, we make a great product, but we also need to inspire people to use it. And so we're constantly focusing on how it will make people feel, how it will make their bodies look, how it will make issues that are in their family, potentially less concerning around whether it's heart disease, diabetes, or cancer. So we have to keep inspiring people to use these products, and not, I think there's two approaches. You can fearmonger, and you can talk about how the world's going to come to an end, and if you don't do this, things are going to be really bad. Or you can create excitement around it, and we call that altruistic, hedonistic altruism, in the sense that let's allow people to feel great about what they're doing, both from a personal perspective, but also from what they're contributing to the community. And we try very hard to do that. I think Tesla's done a good job.
I love that term, hedonistic altruism. I mean, it's a sense of duty isn't always, the greatest, certainly not the most fun, motivator.
Yeah.
I think that's. There's also a very good seg. Talking about Tesla is a very good seg to addressing problems like climate change. These are big, long-term problems that require big, long-term solutions. Requires the kind of long-term thinking that can be a challenge for big businesses that have to balance long-term thinking with short-term priorities, short-term business priorities, outside forces that are really looking at those short-term business priorities. Can you talk a little bit about how you, as a leader, manage that balancing act in your business?
Right. That's a great question. It's very topical. You just have to resist the short-term pressure. You absolutely have to. I think about our business as being a $40 billion business someday, and then onward from there. And you're not going to get there if you're so worried about what the street thinks about a particular quarter. So there's been a slowdown in overall economic activity due to COVID, and should we therefore slow down what we're doing? Is the opportunity smaller as a result? Is the urgency less so as a result? No. These are factors that are outside our control. So I'm not adjusting what I'm doing. I'm still building our facilities in China. I'm building our facilities in the Netherlands for Europe. We continue to expand here in the United States. And someone who wants us to run the business quarter to quarter is going to be challenged by that. But that's okay. You have to go back and look at the early shareholder letters of Amazon and some of the other businesses that, we are so much of our lives today. And you see themes in that. And so, one of the things I always suggest to entrepreneurs is the truth in that statement that success leaves clues. If there are businesses that you think are worth looking at as models, really look at them. Again, marinate in that and understand them and obsess about them a little bit. Begin to understand their culture. Begin to understand what makes them tick and adopt what works for you, and leave the rest alone.
Um, Similarly, so your company started with funding from venture capital. Venture capital, similarly, can be challenging as a model for funding work on really big long term problems. I think there's a track record of like clean tech having challenges sometimes with that.
Mhm.
Are there, to your mind, big opportunities or big needs out there that are not being addressed because it's really difficult to get the kind of large scale funding to tackle those problems with new businesses?
Right. That's a good question. I think for me, what's been so encouraging about our journey, and so we spent about 3 years just funding it ourselves, and then I was really fortunate to get funding from some just great folks, and have been with me and are still with me. Ray Lane, for example, came in very early. Seth Goldman and others, and yeah, I have a great board, and they've been with me since the beginning. Michael Pucker, et cetera. Um, uh, what's gratifying and I think encouraging and gives me great optimism for the future is that money is chasing solutions now, and so. In fact, I think there's too much. There's too much money now going into some of the concepts around plant-based from a venture perspective. But that always happens. You look at what happened in clean tech. I think the area that concerns me the most is if you look at plastics. There's plenty of interest in funding solutions for plastics, but the science there is still pretty challenging. There isn't yet, in my view, a silver bullet, and so I keep looking for solutions to that. I mean, you can't run on the beach anymore here in Los Angeles without seeing enormous amounts of trash washed up, at least where I do it. And it comes to the point where your hands are full of bottle caps and everything else. And so we have to solve that problem. I mean, I think you've heard the statistic, I'm sure, that there's going to be more plastic in the oceans than fish by 2050. That's not okay. And we have to solve that. And so I'd like to see more money going into that and more of the science coming together more quickly.
Yeah, yeah. For a while, so you basically invented a new product category. For a while, you had it all to yourself. As you were just talking about, there are multiple companies coming into that space now. You have one notable competitor who has built some scale very quickly, Impossible. I'm curious how the emergence of a competitive set in the space that you invented has changed how you think about the space.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I should rephrase a little bit. I don't think there's too much money going into it. I think it's just that we got to be careful about where it's going, I guess. I mean, this is a big problem. So, there should actually be more funding. I guess my sense there is that there's efforts to try to maybe catch the next Beyond Meat or something like that. And I think supply chain research and things like that are really important. But with competition, I mean, it's good because it is broadening the category. People are more aware of it now as there's now more and more companies spending more money. I think Impossible Foods is a lot of good people there. There's some good research going on there, but we do take a different approach, and I think that the consumer will need to decide. I mean, we are very, very clear on an issue that we don't use genetic modification. I don't think it's necessary. I think that what's in the earth today is ample for us to be able to create meat from plants. And I think the other piece is that we are entirely focused on. We don't think you need to separate sustainability and health. We think you can achieve both of those goals simultaneously in your product. And so we're very focused on keeping things out of our product that may be detrimental to the human body, even if it takes us longer to get to that perfect taste of animal protein. And so we don't use genetically modified ingredients. We don't use things that that are in meat that are concerning. And when we have to, such as saturated fat, to get the right mouthfeel, we try to use as little as possible to get there. And so it's a different approach, but it's a battle of ideas, and that's what's great about the market. Does the consumer want genetically modified heme, or would they prefer to avoid it? Both are valid avenues, and we picked ours, and they picked theirs, and we'll see which one resonates the most.
Does having a competitor like that help you sharpen your focus in that sense?
Yeah, it really does. And so, I love to compete, and competition is really only fun when you're winning. So you gotta also win, and it does. It absolutely does. And it's. I love sports, and to be able to be in business where it's so competitive is a lot of fun. So if they were to go away, or competition would go away, it wouldn't be the same experience. We believe we have the right solution. We believe the right team, and that we're going to continue to grow at a very, very rapid rate. Doesn't mean that others can't be in the marketplace, but we have such confidence in the choices we've made around health, the choices we've made around how we conduct our business, that I think we're going to keep winning.
Have changing consumer habits during 2020, during the pandemic? You talked earlier about how things are changing. It's not going to change your plans or change sort of how you view the space. But has it manifested itself in any interesting ways at Beyond? Has it created opportunities that weren't there before? I feel like the more I talk to businesses this year, the more I see people finding opportunity in this sort of really challenging environment. Things they didn't even anticipate.
Absolutely. One is, I happen to be friendly with the founder of Zoom, and man, I'm a bigger believer now, of course, like many people, in the power of that technology to be part of a solution around climate and other things. We don't need to fly everywhere all the time. These meetings that we have where we fly all the way across the country for an hour, when you think about the carbon impact of that flight, we need to reconsider that if we're really going to solve climate, and technology like Zoom can help us. I think the other issue is the comorbidity. I don't want to take everything back to our product, but if you look at so much of the hospitalization and death rates around COVID, everybody knows this now, that a lot of them have to do with underlying health conditions, and that those top health conditions are ones that we can solve for, or at least make a very strong contribution toward in terms of helping live healthier lives: heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. By changing your diet, you can have an impact on those chronic diseases. And so, as COVID, is so awful and disruptive and so much loss has occurred, it just makes me feel even more passionate about, let's get this product in people's hands. Let's get this lifestyle change into people's lives, so that they can be stronger when there's an epidemic or a pandemic like this. And these pandemics, we've had them before in human history, and we've gotten through them, and our societies have resumed, and this one will pass. But I think zoonotic diseases are something we have to pay very close attention to in the future. With all this noise and appropriate focus on COVID, we almost completely forgot about the swine flu issues that wiped out, huge numbers of the hog population in China, and led to skyrocketing pork prices. That's going to keep happening. And so we have to rethink again how we get protein from plants to the center of the plate. Do we want to run that plant material through an animal, or do we want to be more efficient and run it through a system of heating, cooling, and pressure like us, where you don't have the opportunity to have these zoonotic diseases cross over into the human population?
Last thing, we're running short on time here. Again, we're this conference is all about sort of giving the entrepreneurial community resources to and perspective to sort of tackle the future. I'm curious what you personally are reading or watching or taking in right now that you're finding very helpful.
So yeah, great. I think one of the key points is just the concept of reading. One of the things that and it hasn't been the lack of on the work side. It's been, with my kids not being, in practices every night or games every weekend that I have to be at, I've had an opportunity to do more reading, and I love to read. And I don't understand the idea that you're going to form new ideas and contribute to society without just dumping as much as you can into your brain. And so I do read a lot, and I try to read in quick succession different books to allow different ideas to germinate as I read that material. And so I think maybe I'll return to the author that I just talked about, Stephen Johnson. I had an opportunity to hear him speak, and I just really started to read his work. I think he's very interesting in terms of what he's focused on. I've also gone back and read a lot of the classics recently that have meant so much to me in my life, whether it's Rachel Carson's Silent Spring or Francis LePay's Diet for a Small Planet. Many of these books had the origins of these ideas in them, and it just took, there's a Victor Hugo quote, "Nothing is more powerful than an idea as time has come." These ideas aren't new. It's just I've been very fortunate to be acting on them in a time and maybe take a slightly different look at them than others did in the past, at a time when it's so incredibly important to do it, and that's really been a blessing. But for the entrepreneur, read as much as you can and study businesses that impress you. I just read early this year The Everything Store about Amazon, and I thought that was really helpful to our business. Just keep after that growth process internally, and I think the last piece, just an entrepreneurial advice. There's I can't remember the band that wrote this, but there's a great line: decide who to be and go be it. Stop thinking about what you want to do. Go create the vision that you have for yourself and for your career, and go do it. There's too many people that are held back due to fear or due to a sense that's not what they're supposed to be doing, or that they're going to fail and their life's going to be more difficult as a result. They may fail, but then they get right back up. All the great stories in history, enormous amounts of failure. And so it's just part of the ticket, the entry point for success. So I would keep trying to find that in yourself that allows you to run through obstacles, connect with that, and listen to it, and go out and do the idea that you have. Don't wait.
It's great advice. It's great advice. Thank you. And thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Sure. I really appreciate it. And it's just really fun to reconnect with you, and hopefully we'll get back together in Missouri at some point, and you can see all the progress we've made at our facilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to everybody watching, thank you for being here. Make sure to go check out the marketplace, do some networking. We have a lot of great programming left in the next couple days. And thanks for being here. Thanks again to Ethan.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.